The siren grew louder behind us, but the man in the gray hoodie never turned his head. Rain tapped against the bus shelter in soft, uneven clicks. Richard glanced toward the street with annoyance instead of fear. He still thought this was about me causing a scene. The HOA chief tightened his grip on my coat and pulled me backward across the wet sidewalk. My heels scraped against the curb. "You are done here," he hissed. "You hear me?" But his voice was shaking now. He had finally noticed the traffic light flickering above us. Red. Green. Dark. Then red again. Claire stepped closer to her father. Her umbrella tilted as wind swept down the avenue between the towers. "Dad, maybe we should go inside," she said quietly. Richard brushed rain from his sleeve without answering her. The cameras near the plaza entrance kept rolling. Reporters shifted under plastic covers, confused why the photo op had stopped. Then the radio in my hand crackled again. One sharp burst of static. "Target delayed," a voice muttered. My stomach tightened hard enough to hurt. The hoodie man touched his ear again. Across the street, the white van rolled forward exactly 3 feet and stopped beside a fire hydrant. No delivery driver parked like that in Midtown. Not during rush hour. Not with an empty loading lane 20 feet away. I looked down at the service hatch near Richard's shoes. Steam pushed through the cracks in weak bursts now. Too weak. Pressure drop. Somebody had tampered with the line beneath the sidewalk. I knew that sound. I had spent 19 winters working utility maintenance before my life cracked apart piece by piece. Pipes talked if you listened long enough. So did streets. The officers finally arrived through the traffic. Blue lights flashed against the rain-soaked windows of Whitmore Plaza. One young cop stepped out first. Tall. Nervous eyes. Fresh boots still too clean. Officer Reeves. I saw the name stitched over his jacket pocket. "What is happening here?" he asked. The HOA chief pointed directly at me. "This homeless guy assaulted Mr. Whitmore." "No," Claire cut in suddenly. Her voice surprised everyone. "He pushed my father back before something happened." Richard looked at her sharply. The pause that followed felt heavier than the rain. Reeves turned toward me. His hand stayed near his belt, but not threatening. Careful. Watching. "Sir," he said slowly, "why did you stop him?" I held up the cracked radio. Water dripped from my sleeve onto the sidewalk. "Because somebody out here is waiting for him to stand still." The hoodie man finally moved. Not fast. Calm. He crossed behind a city bus that hissed to a stop beside the curb. For 1 second he disappeared completely from sight. My chest tightened. Too smooth. Too practiced. "Where did he go?" Claire whispered. I stepped toward the street instinctively, but the HOA chief blocked me again. "Enough," he barked. "This lunatic is manipulating everybody." Then his shoe struck the service hatch by accident. Metal rang hollow beneath us. Officer Reeves looked down immediately. So did I. The sound was wrong. Empty. My pulse jumped. The hatch should have vibrated from pressure below. Instead it echoed like a drum. Somebody had opened the lower chamber recently. The lock still looked sealed, but the bolts were scratched bright silver beneath the rust. Fresh marks. Fresh enough to smell the cut metal through the rain. Reeves crouched beside it. "Sir," he called toward Richard, "I think we need bomb squad here now." The cameras exploded with movement after that. Reporters rushed forward. Security guards started shouting into earpieces. Traffic backed up for half a block as horns blared through the storm. And across the avenue, the white van suddenly turned off its headlights. The moment the van lights went dark, every sound on the block seemed to sharpen. Horns blared farther uptown. Rainwater rushed along the curb in dirty silver streams. Officer Reeves stood slowly from the service hatch, one hand still resting near the scratched bolts. "Back everybody up," he ordered. His voice cracked halfway through. The reporters hesitated for half a second before scrambling backward under their cameras and umbrellas. Security guards started waving pedestrians away from the plaza entrance. Richard Whitmore finally looked less annoyed than concerned. His jaw tightened as he watched the officers spread across the sidewalk. Claire moved closer beside him, close enough that her coat brushed his sleeve. She had stopped checking her phone. That told me more than words could. People only stop looking at screens when fear becomes real. I kept my eyes on the opposite side of the avenue. The hoodie man never reappeared after the bus passed. Too clean. Too fast. The city bus hissed away from the curb, trailing mist behind its tires. Empty street. Empty sidewalk. But the van remained. Silent. Waiting. "Sir," Reeves said carefully to Richard, "we need to move you inside immediately." Richard glanced toward me before answering. It was quick, but I caught it. The first real look. Not at my coat or beard or shopping cart. At me. "You are certain something is down there?" he asked. His voice had lost some of its edge now. I rubbed rainwater from my eyes with the back of my glove. "That hatch was opened recently," I said. "And somebody rerouted pressure below the line." The HOA chief scoffed loudly. "This is insane. He is making stories because he wants attention." But nobody looked at him anymore. That was the problem with power. It disappeared the second fear entered the room. Reeves motioned another officer toward the curb. "Call coned emergency response and bomb squad," he said. "Now." The words rolled through the crowd like cold wind. A woman near the cameras covered her mouth. Somebody farther back whispered, "Bomb?" Then the entire block changed shape. Doors slammed. Car engines revved. Pedestrians rushed away beneath umbrellas while police tape came out in quick yellow rolls. The rain kept falling anyway. Calm. Steady. Like the city did not care. Claire stared at the service hatch for several seconds before speaking. "How did you even notice this?" she asked me softly. Her voice barely carried over the traffic. I looked down at the steam fading through the cracks. "Pressure lines have rhythm," I said. "This one stopped breathing right." She frowned slightly, trying to understand. Richard studied me harder now. His expensive coat darkened with rain around the shoulders. He looked older standing there under the flashing lights. Tired around the eyes. The kind of tired money could not hide. Then my radio crackled again. Louder this time. Everyone heard it. "Window closing," the voice muttered through static. Reeves spun toward me immediately. "Who is talking?" he demanded. "Not me," I answered. I turned the volume knob carefully. Another hiss. Then silence. But my stomach had already tightened. "They know police are here now," I said quietly. The wind shifted hard between the buildings. Somewhere above us, loose metal clanged against scaffolding. Claire flinched. Richard placed a hand lightly against her shoulder without looking away from me. The van engine started across the avenue. Low rumble. Deep enough to feel through the pavement. Reeves reached for his radio instantly. "Vehicle moving eastbound," he barked. "White cargo van. No visible plates." The van rolled slowly through the intersection. Too slowly. Like it wanted to be watched. Rain slid across its windshield in silver ribbons. I stepped closer to the curb despite the officers. My pulse started climbing fast now. Not because the van was leaving. Because of what it left behind. The service hatch beneath Richard's feet had started vibrating. The vibration beneath the hatch started soft enough that only I noticed it at first. A faint metallic hum traveled up through the wet concrete into my boots. Then Officer Reeves felt it too. His eyes snapped downward. "Everybody move back now," he shouted. The command hit the crowd like a breaking wave. Reporters stumbled over cables. Umbrellas collided. One camera tipped sideways into a puddle with a loud crack. Richard grabbed Claire's arm immediately and pulled her away from the curb. The rain came harder now, sharp drops slapping against glass and steel. I stepped toward the hatch instead of away from it. Reeves caught my sleeve. "What are you doing?" he barked. I pulled the utility key from inside my glove. Rust stained my fingertips orange. If pressure builds under there, this whole corner goes up, I said. The HOA chief stared at the key in disbelief. Where did he get that? He snapped. That line was decommissioned years ago. I looked at him carefully then. Too carefully. He should not have known that. Reeves noticed it too. His expression changed for half a second. Small. Sharp. The kind of look cops get when puzzle pieces stop fitting right. Sir, Reeves said slowly to the HOA chief. How do you know what line this is? The man opened his mouth, then closed it again. Rainwater slid down the side of his face. I manage this property, he muttered. Weak answer. Too late. The hatch vibrated harder beneath us. Somewhere underground, metal groaned. I dropped to one knee beside the bolts. My fingers moved automatically over the lock plate. Old habits live deep in the body. Even after 20 years. Even after losing everything else. Claire crouched beside her father several feet away, both of them watching me now instead of the cameras. Richard's polished image had vanished completely. No speech. No smile. Just rain soaking through his expensive coat, while emergency lights painted blue flashes across his face. Can you shut it down? He asked. I twisted the utility key once against the lock. It stuck halfway. Maybe, I answered. If they did not damage the secondary valve. Reeves immediately motioned the officers back another 10 feet. Good instinct. He was learning fast. The city noise around us had changed now. Fewer horns. More sirens. A helicopter blade echoed faintly somewhere above the buildings. The white van was gone completely, but its absence felt heavier than when it was parked there. Like the street had been abandoned on purpose. Then my radio burst alive again. Loud enough for everyone to hear clearly this time. Timer arm, the voice crackled. Claire covered her mouth. Reeves grabbed the radio from my hand instantly. Trace this frequency now. He shouted toward another officer. But I barely heard him. My attention locked onto the hatch. The vibration had shifted rhythm. Faster now. Uneven. Wrong. Somebody below had rigged pressure against the emergency bypass system. Smart enough to avoid detection. Smart enough to understand city infrastructure. Richard stepped closer despite the officers trying to stop him. Tell me exactly what you need, he said. I looked up at him through the rain. His face had changed. Not softer. Clearer. Like fear had finally scraped the arrogance away. I need everybody off this block, I answered. And I need that service tunnel map from your building basement. His eyes narrowed immediately. How do you know there is a tunnel map? Because utility grids connected old Manhattan like veins beneath the skin. Wealthy buildings kept copies during emergency retrofits. Men like Richard usually never noticed them. But maintenance workers did. Invisible people always noticed what powerful people ignored. Claire looked at her father quickly. Dad, she whispered, just trust him. Richard hesitated only 1 second before turning toward his security team. Get the basement files, he ordered. Now. The HOA chief suddenly stepped backward toward the plaza entrance. Too fast. Too nervous. Reeves noticed instantly. So did I. Then the chief reached for something inside his jacket. Officer Reeves moved first. His hand locked around the HOA chief's wrist before the man could fully reach inside his jacket. Rain splashed hard across the sidewalk as both men stumbled near the plaza doors. Security guards froze in place, unsure who they were supposed to protect anymore. The chief's badge swung loose against his chest. Easy, Reeves warned sharply. Show me your hands. For 1/10 second, nobody moved. The vibration beneath the service hatch deepened into a low grinding hum. I felt it through my knees against the concrete. Claire looked from the chief to the hatch and back again. Her breathing had turned shallow. Richard stepped in front of her automatically now. Instinct finally replacing image. The chief slowly pulled out a phone instead of a weapon. Black case. Cracked screen. But his hand shook too much for relief to settle over the crowd. Reeves grabbed the device anyway. "Unlock it," he ordered. "This is harassment," the chief snapped back. "You people are listening to a homeless drunk over property management." I watched his eyes instead of his words. He kept glancing toward the avenue, toward where the van had disappeared. That told me enough. Another burst crackled through the radio still clipped to my coat pocket. "Secondary live," the voice hissed. Then static swallowed the rest. Reeves heard it too. His face tightened immediately. "There is more than one device," he muttered. The wind shifted again between the towers. Wet newspaper rolled across the empty street. Police tape snapped sharply in the air. Most of the crowd had been pushed back now, but dozens still watched from behind barricades, phones glowing beneath umbrellas. The city always watched disaster before understanding it. I forced the utility key deeper into the rusted lock plate. Metal scraped hard against metal. The sound cut through the rain like grinding teeth. "Come on," I whispered under my breath. Richard heard me. "How long?" he asked. I shook my head once. "Depends how much pressure they build below the bypass line." Claire stared down at me carefully. "You really work these tunnels?" she asked. I nodded without looking up. 20 years. "Then why are you out here?" The question slipped out quietly. Honest. Not cruel. Richard glanced sharply toward her, but I only tightened my grip on the key. "Because life breaks faster than steel pipes," I answered. Silence followed that. Heavy silence. The kind rich people never knew what to do with. Then the lock finally gave way with a loud metallic crack. Reeves stepped back instantly. So did everybody else. Steam burst upward through the loosened hatch seams in hot white clouds. The smell hit a second later. Gas. Strong enough to sting the back of the throat. Officers started shouting at once. "Move everybody back now!" Reeves yelled. 2 blocks minimum. Panic spread faster this time. Reporters abandoned equipment. Security guards rushed people towards side streets. Tires screeched somewhere downtown as traffic redirected around the plaza. The entire avenue had become noise and flashing lights. But underneath it all, I heard something worse. A ticking sound. Faint. Rhythmic. Coming from below the hatch. My blood ran cold. Not fear. Recognition. I had heard timers like that overseas near collapsed utility stations after storms and sabotage jobs. Somebody wanted pressure and panic at the same time. "Reeves," I said sharply. "Get bomb squad underground access now." He crouched beside me immediately. Rain dripped from the brim of his cap. "Can you disarm it?" I looked down into the narrow opening beneath the hatch. Darkness. Steam. Thick utility cables disappearing into concrete shadow. Then I saw it. A tiny blinking red light deeper below the pipes. Steady rhythm. Patient. My stomach tightened hard. "No," I answered honestly. "But I know where they want the blast to travel." Richard stepped closer despite officers yelling behind him. "Travel where?" he demanded. I looked slowly toward Whitmore Plaza. 40 floors of glass and steel rising into the storm above us. Emergency lights reflected across its windows like blood-red waves. "Your backup generators are connected through this tunnel," I said. "If pressure hits those lines—" I stopped speaking. I did not need to finish. Richard understood anyway. His face lost all color. Then somewhere high above us inside the tower, the lights suddenly went out. The blackout rolled upward through Whitmore Plaza floor by floor like a dark wave climbing glass. Office windows blinked out in uneven rows. First the lobby. Then the trading offices above it. Then the executive levels higher in the tower. Rain streaked down the blackened windows while emergency strobes flashed red across the wet pavement below. Claire grabbed her father's arm hard enough to wrinkle his sleeve. "Dad," she whispered. Richard did not answer right away. He stared up at the building like he was seeing it for the first time. Not as a symbol. Not as a company. as something fragile. Officer Reeves pressed his radio tighter against his shoulder. "Evacuate the tower immediately," he ordered. "All floors." Sirens echoed from 3 directions now. Fire trucks pushed through traffic farther down the avenue, while officers expanded barricades another block outward. Steam kept pouring from the open hatch beside my knee. Thick. White. Angry. The ticking below us sounded faster now. I leaned lower toward the tunnel opening and caught another smell beneath the gas. Burned wiring. Somebody had overloaded the backup transfer lines. Smart setup. Very smart. The kind built by someone who understood infrastructure diagrams better than most engineers. "Can you stop it?" Reeves asked again. His voice was quieter this time. Less authority. More hope. I looked down into the steam. "Not from up here." Richard stepped closer immediately. "Then where?" I pointed toward the service entrance beneath the plaza loading dock across the street. "There is a secondary access tunnel under your building." Claire frowned. "I have worked in that tower for 6 years," she said. "I have never heard of tunnels." "Because people like you use elevators," I answered gently. "People like me fixed what sat underneath them." She fell silent after that. Not offended. Thinking. The HOA chief stood near 2 officers now, soaked from head to toe. His face looked pale under the emergency lights. Reeves still held the man's phone in one hand. The cracked screen glowed faintly with missed calls. "We pulled security logs already," another officer rushed over to say. "Somebody disabled underground cameras 20 minutes before the fundraiser started." Reeves looked directly at the HOA chief after hearing that. The man immediately shook his head. "I did not touch those systems." But nobody believed him anymore. The city noise around us shifted again. Louder now. More panicked. Thousands of people were pouring out of the dark tower into rain and police tape. Wet shoes slapped against pavement. Security alarms pulsed somewhere deep inside the building. A woman cried near the barricades while reporters shouted over each other into cameras. Yet through all of it, the ticking under the hatch kept perfect rhythm. Calm. Patient. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an old flashlight wrapped in duct tape. The metal body was scratched nearly silver from years underground. Richard noticed it immediately. "You carry that everywhere?" he asked. I clicked it on. Weak yellow light cut through the steam. "Some jobs never leave your hands," I said. Then I stood slowly. My knees cracked from cold and age. Reeves stepped in front of the tunnel opening instinctively. "You are not going down there alone. You got tunnel maps yet?" I asked Richard instead. One of his assistants came running through the rain carrying a soaked blueprint tube against his chest. The man nearly slipped crossing the slick pavement. Richard snatched the tube and handed it directly to me. Not his security team. Me. That changed something between us. Small. But real. I spread the damp maps across the hood of a police cruiser. Rain hammered the paper immediately. Reeves held a flashlight over the lines while Claire pressed trembling fingers against the corners to keep them flat. There it was. The secondary maintenance corridor beneath Whitmore Plaza. Narrow. Old. Connected directly to the emergency generators under the eastern foundation wall. My pulse slowed the second I saw the layout. Not relief. Focus. "They do not want the whole building," I said quietly. "They want the generators to fail first." Richard stared at the map. "Why?" I traced one finger farther down the tunnel network toward a secured section marked Private Archive Storage. The moment Richard saw the label, his entire face changed. Then Claire looked at him with growing fear. Claire stared down at the archive label on the soaked blueprint like it had suddenly become something alive. Rainwater dripped from her hair onto the paper in tiny dark circles. "Dad," she said carefully, "what is stored down there?" Richard did not answer immediately. That silence said enough. Officer Reeves looked between both of them. Emergency lights washed red and blue across his rain-soaked uniform. "Sir," he said slowly, I need to know now if there is something inside that building people would kill for. Richard rubbed one hand across his jaw. His wedding ring caught the flashing lights for half a second. Private records, he muttered. Financial archives. Client accounts. Reeves kept staring at him. That is not the whole answer. Richard finally looked up. Tired eyes. Heavy eyes. There are federal audit files down there, he admitted quietly. Evidence tied to a corruption investigation. The noise of the street suddenly felt farther away after that. Even the sirens sounded muffled beneath the rain. Claire stepped backward slowly. You told me those files were transferred months ago. Richard did not look at her this time. Only copies. Reeves exhaled hard through his nose. So somebody cuts power, destroys the archives, and wipes evidence clean. I folded the wet blueprint carefully. The tunnel hum beneath the street had changed pitch again. Higher now. Less time. No, I said quietly. That is not all they want. Everyone looked at me. I pointed toward the emergency generator route beneath the eastern wall. If those lines fail while the archives burn, the sprinkler systems go dark too. Reeves cursed softly under his breath. Claire wrapped both arms around herself against the cold. Who would do something like this? She whispered. I thought about the radio voice. The van. The timing. Too organized for random sabotage. Too personal for terrorism. Somebody who knows this building from the inside. I answered. Then Reeves suddenly turned toward the HOA chief again. The man stood near two patrol officers under the plaza awning, soaked and pale beneath the emergency lights. Check his phone records immediately, Reeves ordered. One officer unlocked the cracked phone while another held a flashlight over the screen. The chief shifted nervously. You are making a huge mistake, he snapped. You have no idea who you are dealing with. Reeves glanced up sharply. Neither do you. The officer scrolling through the phone suddenly froze. Detective, he called out. There are deleted messages here. Reeves moved fast beside him. Rainwater rolled off his cap brim as he stared down at the glowing screen. Recover them. I crouched beside the open hatch again. The gas smell had grown thicker. My flashlight beam cut through steam toward the narrow service ladder below. Rusted pipes lined both tunnel walls. Old Manhattan infrastructure. Built strong decades ago, then forgotten by people rich enough to stay above ground. The ticking underneath sounded louder now. Not because the timer changed. Because pressure had. Claire slowly approached beside me. Her expensive shoes splashed through dirty rainwater without her noticing anymore. You are really going down there? She asked. I nodded once. If nobody closes the bypass valve, this block turns into a furnace. She swallowed hard. Then I am coming too. Richard snapped toward her immediately. Absolutely not. Dad, people could die. That is exactly why you stay here. Their voices cut sharply through the rain. Family arguments always sounded smaller beside disaster. Claire looked at me instead of him. Can he do this alone? I glanced down into the dark tunnel. Steam drifted upward around the ladder like breath from something sleeping below us. Probably not, I answered honestly. Richard stepped closer then. Close enough to smell the rain and expensive cologne mixing together. Tell me what you need, he said quietly. Not commanding now. Asking. That changed things too. I handed him the flashlight. Hold this steady, I said. And if I tell you to run, you do not argue. Richard took the flashlight without hesitation. His fingers shook slightly around the metal body. Above us, another section of Whitmore Plaza suddenly went black. Then somebody screamed inside the crowd behind the barricades. The scream came from the barricades near the south corner of the plaza. People scattered sideways through the rain as one of the portable floodlights crashed onto the pavement in a shower of sparks. Officers rushed toward the commotion instantly. Reeves looked over his shoulder for half a second. That was enough distraction for the HOA chief to run. Move! Reeves shouted. 2 officers lunged after him through the wet crowd. The chief slipped between reporters and police tape, shoving past cameras while sirens echoed off the glass towers overhead. Richard cursed under his breath. Claire stared after the fleeing man in disbelief. He was involved, she whispered. I barely heard her. The ticking below the hatch had accelerated again. Faster. Sharper. Like fingernails against metal. Reeves! I barked. He turned back immediately. You have maybe 10 minutes before those generator lines overload. His expression hardened at once. Can you reach the bypass from below? I looked down into the steam-filled shaft. Only through the maintenance corridor. Reeves glanced toward the plaza entrance where frightened employees still poured into the rain. Then we go now. Richard handed the flashlight back to me carefully. His fingers brushed the scratched metal casing. You said there were secondary valves underground, he said. Can they stop the pressure? If they were not sealed manually. Claire frowned. Manually? Whoever built this wanted control after the blackout, I answered. Automatic systems would ruin that. A deep rumble rolled beneath our feet then. Not loud. Low. Like distant thunder trapped underground. The rainwater near the hatch trembled in tiny circles. Several officers stepped backward instinctively. Reeves pulled a flashlight from his belt. I am coming with you. Richard immediately shook his head. No. Your job is crowd control. Reeves looked him dead in the eye. My job is keeping people alive. That landed hard. Richard did not argue again. I swung my legs carefully onto the rusted ladder inside the hatch. Heat wrapped around my face instantly. Damp concrete smell. Burned wires. Gas. Old tunnel air never changed no matter what city you stood in. Claire suddenly grabbed my sleeve before I descended farther. Her hand was cold from the rain. You still have not told us your name, she said quietly. For 1 second, everything around us slowed. Sirens. Rain. Flashing lights. All distant. I looked up at her pale face beneath the emergency strobes. Elijah, I answered. Richard repeated it softly like he was testing the sound for the first time. Elijah. Then another section of Whitmore Plaza went dark above us. Emergency alarms started pulsing from somewhere deep inside the building. Reeves climbed down behind me without hesitation. His boots rang hard against the ladder rungs. Seal the perimeter, he shouted upward to the remaining officers. Nobody enters this block without my order. Richard stood at the hatch edge looking down after us. Rain framed him in silver streaks from above. He looked nothing like the polished billionaire from the fundraiser anymore. Just a tired father standing over a hole in the street, while strangers risked their lives beneath his building. Claire stayed beside him silently. I descended deeper into the tunnel. Steam thickened around the flashlight beam until the air looked solid enough to touch. Pipes lined both walls and rusted rows. Thick electrical cables snaked overhead through dripping concrete brackets. Somewhere ahead, water dripped steadily into darkness. Tick. 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 But underneath it all, I heard something else now. Footsteps. Very faint. Somewhere farther down the corridor. Reeves heard them too. He froze beside me on the ladder. Both of us listened carefully. 3 slow steps. Then silence. My pulse slowed instead of rising. Training did that sometimes. Fear sharpened into focus. Reeves lowered his voice. You think somebody is still down there? I aimed the flashlight deeper into the steam-filled corridor. The beam caught movement for half a second near the generator pipes. A shadow disappearing around the bend. Then the radio clip to my coat crackled one final time. He is early, the voice whispered. The radio went silent again, but the words stayed inside the tunnel like smoke. Reeves tightened his grip on the flashlight beside me. Water dripped steadily from overhead pipes onto the concrete floor below. The sound echoed through the narrow corridor in slow metallic taps. Somewhere farther ahead, another footstep scraped lightly against concrete. Then nothing. I climbed off the ladder first. My boots splashed into an inch of dark water running along the tunnel floor. Heat wrapped around us from the overloaded generator lines nearby. The air smelled thick with gas and burned insulation. Reeves descended beside me carefully, flashlight beam shaking once before he steadied it. "Talk to me," he whispered. I pointed deeper into the corridor. "The bypass valve sits past the eastern generator wall." Reeves scanned the steam-filled darkness ahead. "And the person down here?" I listened again. Silence. Too much silence. "He knows we came early," I answered. "That changes everything." Above us, the muffled roar of the city sounded distant now. Just faint sirens bleeding through layers of concrete and steel. Underground always felt separate from time. Like the city forgot you existed the second you stepped beneath it. We moved forward slowly. Pipes rattled overhead from pressure surges. Condensation rolled down rusted metal in warm streams. My flashlight beam swept across old maintenance labels barely visible beneath decades of grime. Then the beam stopped. Fresh boot prints. Muddy water still settling around them. Reeves crouched immediately beside the marks. "Recent," he muttered. "Very." I touched the concrete wall lightly beside the prints. Warm. Somebody had passed through less than 2 minutes earlier. The tunnel curved sharply ahead near the backup generators. Thick electrical cables hummed through overhead trays. The ticking sound had grown louder now. No longer distant. Close enough to feel inside the chest. Reeves swallowed hard. "How much time?" he asked. I listened carefully to the rhythm. "Less than 5 minutes." He exhaled slowly through his nose. Fear was there now. Controlled. But real. We reached the first generator chamber moments later. Massive backup units lined the concrete room in rows taller than pickup trucks. Emergency red lights flashed weakly through the darkness. Steam drifted across the floor in low clouds. Then Reeves froze beside me. "Elijah." I followed his flashlight beam toward the eastern wall. The secondary valve housing had been torn open already. Thick wires snaked from the pipe assembly toward a black timing unit blinking steady red numbers. 4 minutes. 22 seconds. Somebody had rigged the pressure release directly into the generator relay system. Smart enough to trigger both failures at once. Reeves reached for his radio instantly. Nothing but static answered him underground. "Can you stop it?" he asked. I stepped carefully toward the valve assembly. My knees ached with every movement now. Age never disappeared underground. It just waited until the worst moments to remind you. I studied the setup quickly. Homemade housing. Military-grade timer. Pressure trigger attached to the bypass wheel. Whoever built it understood utility engineering extremely well. Then I noticed something worse. The valve wheel itself had been welded partially shut. "No," I said quietly. Reeves looked at me sharply. "No?" I pointed toward the weld marks. "They never planned for anybody to shut it off manually." His flashlight drifted toward the blinking timer again. 4 minutes. 9 seconds. Somewhere behind us, metal scraped suddenly against concrete. Both of us spun instantly. Flashlight beams cut through steam toward the tunnel entrance. Nothing there. Just drifting white vapor and dark pipes disappearing around the bend. But then another sound came. Soft. Human. Breathing. Reeves pulled his sidearm halfway from its holster without fully drawing it. "Show yourself," he called into the corridor. Silence answered him. The steam shifted slightly near the far wall. Then a man stepped slowly into the edge of our flashlight beams. Gray hoodie. Rainwater still dripping from the sleeves. Calm eyes. Calm posture. The same man from the street above. He looked directly at me first. Then he smiled faintly. "You were supposed to stay invisible," he said. The man stood perfectly still beside the generator pipes while steam curled around his boots. Gray hoodie soaked dark from the rain above. One hand relaxed at his side. The other held a small black trigger device no larger than a phone. Reeves raised his flashlight higher. "Police," he barked. "Do not move." The man barely reacted. His eyes stayed locked on me instead. Calm eyes. Military eyes. The kind trained to measure exits before people. You remember tunnels well, he said quietly. His voice echoed softly off the concrete walls. I stared back at him through the steam. I remember men who hide inside them. The timer beside the bypass valve blinked down another second. 3 minutes. 41. Reeves stepped slightly in front of me now. Protective instinct. Good cop. Wrong moment. Drop the device, he ordered. The man smiled faintly again. If I wanted him dead already, he said, nodding toward me, this conversation would not exist. The air inside the chamber felt hotter now. Generator lines hummed harder overhead. Sweat mixed with rainwater beneath my coat collar. I studied the trigger device carefully. No wires. Remote dead switch maybe. Or bluff. Men like him survived because other people guessed wrong. Who hired you? Reeves demanded. The man glanced briefly toward the blinking timer. That question matters less every second. I moved closer to the valve assembly slowly. You built this for the archives, I said. Not the building. His expression shifted slightly. Tiny movement. Enough. The archives were insurance, he answered. The real target was panic. Reeves frowned. Why? The man finally looked toward him directly. Because panic erases trust faster than fire. Somewhere above us, another muffled alarm sounded through the ceiling. The city felt very far away underground. The timer continued its patient countdown. 3 minutes. 11. I crouched carefully beside the welded valve wheel. Old bolts. Thick industrial sealant. Somebody had done the work fast but precise. My fingers traced the edge of the pressure housing. Then I noticed fresh scratches beneath the weld seam. Weak point. Small. But there. Elijah, Reeves said quietly without looking at me. Can you break it loose? Maybe. The man in the hoodie tilted his head slightly. You always were stubborn. Reeves snapped toward me instantly. You know him? I stayed silent for 1 second too long. The answer showed anyway. Steam drifted between us while old memories clawed upward from places I spent years burying. Flooded tunnels overseas. Emergency utility crews. Men abandoned after promises expired. His name is Carter, I said finally. Former military engineering. Carter's faint smile disappeared. Former disposable asset, he corrected. Reeves looked between us with growing confusion. What the hell is this? Carter stepped slowly sideways near the pipes. Whitmore buried evidence that ruined people, he said calmly. Careers. Whistleblowers. Entire pension accounts. So you destroy a city block? Reeves shot back. Carter's eyes hardened slightly. Nobody listens until lights go out. The ticking beside the valve sounded louder now. Faster only because time was thinning. I grabbed a rusted maintenance wrench from beside the pipe housing. Metal scraped sharply against concrete. Carter watched every movement carefully. You will not open it in time, he said. Then why stay down here? I asked. Silence stretched between us. Steam rolled through the generator room in thick waves. Reeves slowly lowered his flashlight toward Carter's trigger hand. Careful. Patient. Carter looked toward the blinking timer once more. Because somebody needed to witness what they built, he answered. Softly. Then the overhead lights inside the tunnel flickered once. Twice. And suddenly shut off completely. Darkness swallowed the chamber at once. Reeves cursed under his breath. My flashlight beams swung wildly through steam and shadows. Then somewhere inside the darkness, metal footsteps started moving fast. The footsteps echoed hard through the dark tunnel. Fast. Precise. My flashlight beam jerked sideways through clouds of steam, catching only wet concrete and rusted pipes. Reeves pulled his sidearm fully now. Stop moving! He shouted into the darkness. No answer came back. Only another burst of footsteps farther down the corridor. Carter was retreating deeper underground. The timer beside the bypass valve kept blinking red numbers through the dark. 2 minutes. 38 seconds. The weak emergency lights above us sputtered once, then died again. Heat pressed harder against the walls now. Generator overload. I could hear the strain in the pipes. Deep metallic groans running through the tunnel like something alive beneath the city. Reeves looked from the fleeing shadow to the blinking timer. Split decision. Chase the suspect or save the block. His jaw tightened hard enough to show through the dim light. Go after him, I said quietly. Reeves stared at me. You cannot do this alone. I gripped the heavy maintenance wrench tighter. My knuckles ached from cold and rust. People upstairs do not have time. He hesitated only half a second before sprinting into the darkness after Carter. His flashlight beam bounced wildly along the tunnel walls before disappearing around the bend. Then I was alone beside the valve assembly again. Alone except for the ticking. Tick. 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 I crouched beside the welded wheel and jammed the wrench beneath the weak point I noticed earlier. Metal scraped sharply. The weld held. Steam hissed around my face. Sweat rolled down my neck beneath the damp coat collar. Above me, electrical cables rattled from unstable current. Somewhere inside the building overhead, alarms continued pulsing through the concrete ceiling. The city still breathing while this tunnel threatened to choke it. I forced the wrench harder against the seam. Nothing. The wheel barely moved. My shoulder burned from the pressure. Then my radio crackled softly again. Different voice this time. Claire. Elijah? She called through heavy static. Can you hear me? I grabbed the radio immediately. Barely. Her breathing sounded shaky. Rain and sirens bled through the signal from above ground. My father found something in the archives, she said. Names. Payments. Security contractors. I wedged the wrench deeper into the valve housing. Claire, this is not the time. One of the names is Carter. That stopped me cold. The ticking suddenly sounded louder. What? He worked private security for Whitmore Holdings after the military, she said quickly. Dad says somebody covered up an operation overseas years ago. My chest tightened. Pieces finally started locking together underground. Carter. Utility engineering. Abandoned assets. Buried files. Richard had not been the original target. The archives were. The blackout only opened the door. Elijah, Claire whispered through static. My father says Carter lost his brother during that operation. I closed my eyes for one brief second. Underground heat wrapped around me like a furnace. Men forgotten by systems always carried ghosts longer than anyone saw. Then another deep rumble shook the tunnel floor beneath my boots. Dust drifted from the ceiling pipes. 1 minute. 53 seconds. No more time left for ghosts. I planted both feet harder against the concrete and pulled the wrench with everything left in my shoulders. The welded seam groaned loudly this time. Tiny crack. Tiny movement. Hope. Then footsteps echoed again somewhere behind me. Slow now. Controlled. I turned sharply, flashlight beam cutting through the steam. Reeves emerged from the darkness alone. Breathing hard. Wet from tunnel runoff. He got away through the secondary exit, he said between breaths. Then he saw the cracked weld seam beside me. Tell me that is enough. I looked at the blinking timer. 1 minute. 29 seconds. The valve wheel shifted another inch beneath the wrench. Barely. But enough to change the pressure rhythm in the pipes. Somewhere above us, the generator hum suddenly dipped. Lower. Reeves heard it too. Something changed, he whispered. Then the timer stopped blinking red and switched to solid white. The solid white light on the timer glowed steadily through the steam. No blinking. No countdown. Just silent white. Reeves stared at it beside me, breathing hard from the chase. What does that mean? He asked. I listened carefully to the pipes overhead before answering. The violent rattling had eased slightly. Not gone. But slower. Controlled. Pressure reroute, I said quietly. The system switched modes. Reeves frowned. Good or bad? Before I could answer, the tunnel speakers crackled alive above us. Old emergency intercoms buried inside the maintenance walls. Static hissed through the chamber. Then Carter's voice filled the corridor calmly. You finally opened the bypass. Reeves spun toward the ceiling speakers instantly. Where are you? Carter ignored him. Your city survives because invisible people keep it breathing, he continued. The second they stop, everything collapses. Steam rolled across the floor in slow waves while his words echoed through the concrete chamber. I rested one hand against the loosened valve wheel. Heat still pulsed through the metal. You could have killed thousands, Reeves shouted upward. Silence answered for one long second. Then Carter spoke softer this time. No. I wanted them to notice who gets buried underground first. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Because part of me understood exactly what he meant. Men like Carter. Men like me. Workers forgotten until systems failed. Veterans discarded after usefulness expired. The city only looked down when something underneath it started breaking apart. Reeves glanced toward me sharply, like he could sense the thought crossing my face. Do not start sympathizing with him now, he warned. I shook my head slowly. Understanding somebody is not the same as agreeing with them. The tunnel lights flickered weakly overhead. One row finally sputtered back to life in dim yellow strips. The generator hum steadied another notch lower. Better. But not stable yet. I crouched beside the valve assembly again and examined the cracked weld seam carefully. The bypass wheel had shifted enough to bleed some pressure away from the main lines. Enough to stop catastrophic overload. But not enough to restore the emergency systems upstairs. The generators still need manual reset, I muttered. Reeves wiped sweat and tunnel grime from his forehead. Can that wait? Before I answered, Claire's voice burst through my radio again. Elijah? The fire suppression systems just came back online. Relief softened her voice for the first time all night. In the background I heard people cheering faintly above street level. Emergency crews probably seeing the pressure stabilize. Reeves exhaled deeply beside me. The first real breath he had taken in minutes. But then Claire spoke again. Dad wants to talk to you. Static crackled softly before Richard's voice came through. Different voice now. Stripped clean of public polish. Elijah, he said quietly. The archive files are secured. I leaned back against the warm concrete wall. My knees ached badly now. Exhaustion creeping in through adrenaline cracks. Good. Silence lingered for half a second. Then Richard said something I never expected from a man like him. I should have listened sooner. The tunnel suddenly felt very still after that. Reeves looked away politely. Steam drifted upward between rusted pipes while distant sirens echoed through the city above us. I closed my eyes briefly against the heat. Most people do not see us down here, I answered softly. Richard did not speak immediately. When he finally did, his voice sounded smaller somehow. Honest. I saw you tonight. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Not from praise. From the simple weight of being acknowledged after years of becoming invisible to almost everyone walking past me. Then the emergency intercom crackled one final time overhead. Carter again. Calm. Distant. The eastern tunnel door is open now, he said quietly. You should leave before the inspectors arrive. Reeves stepped toward the speaker immediately. Carter! But only static answered back. I looked down the dark corridor disappearing beyond the generators. Empty now. Silent except for dripping water and humming pipes. Then Reeves noticed something resting beside the tunnel wall near the shadows. A folded military jacket. Left behind on purpose. The military jacket lay folded neatly against the tunnel wall beside the pipes. Dark green fabric. Water still dripping from one sleeve. Reeves picked it up carefully while steam drifted around his boots. A faded unit patch clung to the shoulder seam beneath tunnel grime. No wallet. No phone. No weapon. Carter had left only the jacket behind. Like a man stepping out of one life without carrying proof he existed inside it. The generator hum steadied fully overhead. Strong now. Stable. Somewhere above us, the city lights were coming back online one block at a time. I could feel the current returning through the walls. Reeves stared down the empty eastern corridor for several seconds. "We should go after him," he muttered. But neither of us moved. Deep down, we both knew Carter was already gone. Men trained to disappear rarely stayed long enough for handcuffs. My knees cracked as I pushed myself upright beside the valve assembly. Exhaustion settled into my shoulders like wet concrete. The adrenaline had burned away, leaving only age and ache underneath. Reeves noticed immediately. "You need medical attention." I shook my head once. "I need fresh air." We climbed the ladder slowly back toward street level. Warm steam gave way to cold rain as the hatch opening widened above us. Sirens still echoed through Midtown, but softer now. Controlled instead of panicked. When my head finally rose above the sidewalk, the entire block looked different. Emergency crews packed equipment beside the barricades. Reporters spoke quietly into cameras beneath umbrellas. The giant tower of Whitmore Plaza glowed again floor by floor against the storm clouds overhead. Alive. Claire stood nearest the hatch waiting for us. The moment she saw me climb out, relief crossed her face so quickly she could not hide it. Richard stood beside her under a black umbrella held by one of his assistants. His expensive coat was still soaked from the rain hours earlier. He had never changed. That mattered somehow. Reeves handed the folded military jacket to another officer before stepping aside. For a moment, nobody spoke. The city noise filled the silence instead. Tires hissing through wet streets. Helicopter blades overhead. Water dripping steadily from scaffolding onto pavement. Then Richard stepped toward me slowly. No cameras close now. No reporters near enough to hear. Just the four of us standing beside an open service hatch in the middle of Manhattan. "The federal investigators recovered the archive drives," he said quietly. "Those files will not disappear anymore." I nodded once. My hands still smelled like rust and gas. Richard looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. "And the shelter permits near West 48th," he added carefully. "They were denied through my property board." Claire glanced toward him in surprise. He kept speaking anyway. "That changes tomorrow." Rain tapped softly against the umbrella above him. Not loud. Gentle. The kind of rain that made cities look cleaner than they really were. I stared past him toward the avenue where people rushed by without noticing the workers rolling hoses back into trucks. Invisible people restoring normal life again before sunrise. "You do not owe me anything," I said quietly. Richard shook his head immediately. "Maybe not." His voice tightened slightly. "But I owe this city better than what I became inside it." Claire smiled faintly through tired eyes. Small smile. Real one. Reeves walked back over holding 2 paper coffee cups from a nearby emergency van. Steam curled upward into the cold night air. He handed one to me without saying anything. Warm cup against freezing fingers. Simple thing. Heavy thing. Across the avenue, the first office lights flickered back on inside Whitmore Plaza. Yellow squares glowing against the rain-dark glass. The city breathing normally again. Richard followed my eyes toward the tower. "Most people will never know what happened underneath them tonight," he said softly. I took one slow sip of coffee while steam warmed my face. Then I looked back toward the street where the white van had once waited in silence. "That is usually how this city works," I answered. Then somewhere far downtown, another siren started moving north,